Okay, right.
Hello and welcome to Rockstar Auction House. It's a set of interviews. If you want to go on the website, it's rockstarauctionhouse.com. If you want to contact us, it is hello@rockstarauctionhouse.co.uk. And I have with me from a very sunny country, Mr. John Turner, a wonderful, wonderful human being. Absolutely
Oh,
love with that. We're still in contact. And you know what? One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, which is the fact we're still connected, is predominantly through music, and you consistently throw new acts and new things onto our WhatsApp, where you're pushing these new stuff, and you've heard it and you love it, and the passion that goes with it, I absolutely love, and I think that's indicative of the type of people that surrounded us in music in the 80s and 90s, wasn't it? In the job that we were doing,
sure,
promoting records at radio.
sure.
But I don't know if many people know the sort of history of how we all got into it, and that's what I've been trying to get through these sets of interviews is to ask the question of, when you were growing up, what was your first experience in terms of music? Was it at a novelty record that you went and bought with your WH token? What was the first record you bought?
Well, I'll get to that, Neil. But firstly, I'd say, listen, I am honestly humbled that you wanted to speak to me, and everything that you've sort of like said about the fact that we probably had the best contact that we've ever had, through a social media vibe, which is a WhatsApp group, and we've now done kind of almost 50 monthly playlists of kind of adding music every day, which is incredible. So thank you for sort of inviting me. And when you sort of asked me to sort of like do this and gave me a brief outline, I kind of went to bed and I thought, I get an idea what he's going to kind of ask me here. So I kind of trawled my memory banks, which wasn't that difficult considering there's so much of my life where if I trawled my memory banks, I couldn't remember anything. But anyway, I'll tell you, what happened with me was like, I first got into music. I mean, I was born in 59. I'm now 65. Okay. And so my mum had a brother who was in the RAF and stationed in Singapore. And I remember, he came back on leave one time and he used to bring sort of like, Japanese toys for like me and my sister. And he bought me like this size, smaller than a mobile phone, transistor radio.
Wow.
And so, from that, I was played around with it, and I sort of like, picked up and was, heard. I mean, geez, I was 6, but it was just playing around with, and I started.
Do you remember what stations you managed to tune into?
To be honest, no, but I mean, I suppose they'd probably things like a Luxembourg type.
Luxembourg would have been around, because I listened to that.
Yeah, totally, and so. And I also, my mum had a cousin who had a son who I got in particularly well with, and he was sort of he was like me as well. And so very early stages, I was like, hearing, the Beatles, the Stones, the Small Faces, Traffic, and now there's loads of the bands I was listening to that I can't remember. And I vividly remember probably, the first record that really knocked me out of the ballpark was Day Tripper and Ticket to Ride by the Beatles.
Wow. Right.
So, so that's how, but it was all about pop music. But that was a period of pop music when, you were hearing sort of like, the Move, and the Small Faces and the Who, it's just, the Herd, just unbelievable amount of pop music. The Crazy World of Arthur Brown and Fire, Eloise by Barry Ryan. There was loads of those kind of one-off sort of like, hits. And do you know what? It just blew me away. But this is, when it came to like, what was your first record? Of course, I've got an embarrassing one. But then I remember reading interviews with kind of big stars. Yeah. And to a person, their first record was all an embarrassing record.
Yeah, absolutely.
So mine was a record in 1967. Right. And it was called I Was Kaiser Bill's Batman by Whistling Jack Smith on the D-Ram record label. And it got to #2 in the pop charts.
Wow. I don't think I can recall that.
No. Well, and understandably so. But that, considering I'd been listening to the Beatles and the Stones and, such like acts, and was loving Pictures of Matchstick Men by State as well, I was kind of, was a bit of a curveball. But my second record.
Go back to your first one. Where did you get it from?
I got it from W.H. Smith in Staines.
In Staines, fantastic.
Yes. W.H. Smith.
So remember, because where I grew up, we didn't. There was a few record shops. Boots had a record store.
Boots had a record store, absolutely. W.H. Smith in Staines, but very shortly I'll come on to when we had sort of a couple of proper record stores in same company, one in Staines, one in Ashford. But my second record, Neil, was "Hole in My Shoe" by Traffic.
Wow.
Which of course I was thinking, should I say that's my first record? It's like, no, be honest. There's so many people's first records is a shit record. Oh, yeah. I said, worse. My mum bought me a pick and mix, bought me there's not something that nobody quite like Grandma by whoever.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it started to sort of like escalate as I got towards leaving primary school. My first album that I got was Led Zeppelin 2. And by the time I got into my early teens and it was at my secondary modern school, that was just as kind of, glam rock.
Was it predominantly that sort of type of genre? Was it kind of that sort of glam rock era, psychedelic rock? Was it?
I think I was too. I didn't really kind of, really have a full understanding of psychedelic rock and sort of, to me, kind of, Fleetwood Mac weren't kind of, Peter Green drug records. They were. I mean, I thought I was quite cool, like in sort of Oh Well and the Green Marillion, in 1969. But then again, I also really, really loved Sugar Sugar by the Archies. That was a big record.
Absolutely love that record.
Exactly, and still do love that record. Still do love that record. But once I got to school, it's like I think the glam rock, T-Rex. I mean, I first remember buying Ride a White Swan, and then all of a sudden, we're at Get It On, and then I'm bunking off school to go and buy Telegram Sam from the record scene in Ashford, and this is the other.
Was it called the record scene?
Yeah, it's called the record scene. And so
right. Before you go any further. Do you remember a record store in Sunbury Cross?
Do there was one in the Precinct Park?
Yes.
Late in my years, I was probably around, late teens, early 20s.
The only reason I asked that is I was a rep, and that was worked for a promo team that were out on the road. It was my very first job, and although I lived, it's literally over the road from me now. I remember when I go there, I think, I don't know if anyone even remembers that record shop, but at least you do. So I'm not going mad. It was one there.
I could also, that when I, went to that record shop a few times, this was at the time when we were kind of like, getting it was the advent of the picture disc, whereby they'd actually made the picture into the grooves of the record. So the first one I remember getting was My Best Friend's Girl by the Cars. And the second one was, oh shit, I can't remember the name of the band, but I do remember buying from that shop, a really, not a kind of a photograph which had been sort of like, printed into a clear disc, but a properly grooved picture disc, Bad Out of Hell by Meatloaf.
Wow.
That's the one I bought from that record shop.
Right. Okay.
It was also the time when you were getting kind of, I think, either it was either Roxette or Can't Stand Losing You, police picture disc, but shaped like a police badge, like an American police badge. That's so, right. Just what I needed was the second Cars.
Yes. Yeah.
The first one was, My Best Friend Girl. Then it was, and I had the picture disc of that.
So where were you working at the time, John? Were you at college, or what were you doing at the time?
Well, my school kind of. Well, this is another kind of, opportunity I had to really develop my music sort of love, because I failed my 11 plus and went to probably. Do you know what? I might just as well have gone to Borstal, because the school, the secondary modern school I went to, was so shit, and it actually closed down in under 10 years. Wow. And so I started there, and I actually stopped bothering going before even I had any exams. But in that period, this is when it got really, really exciting. With T-Rex, Alice Cooper, Queen, Mott the Hoople, Led Zeppelin. So I was kind of like glam rocking alongside sort of like, loving the more rock side of things, especially Led Zeppelin.
You doing this on your own, or was there a group of people that were you all in?
There's like mates. This got one mate at secondary school called Dave Francis. He wasn't from the area. He'd come down, and he was a huge Who fan.
Right.
And we just used to go. I used to go around his house all the time. We just listened to records. So he just gone off and bought the Lamb Lies down on Broadway.
Right.
I'd in England by the pound. He just bought Quadrophenia. We'd bunk off school and go up to one of those Soho record stores and go and buy Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy or something,
Yeah.
which had the kind of the band around it to kind of, and then also at that time, we were going, we were going to gigs.
Yes.
And I started going to gigs in like 73. But the thing that, which was an advantage for me, Neil, was that I paid no attention to school at all. It was a hideous school. I didn't like it. I didn't like the people. All I wanted to do was earn some money and buy records and go to gigs.
So
I'm at that age where I'm running after girls and drinking yet. I'm still
yeah. So in Staines, where you were, where were you've described the local record stores. What about the gigs? Would you been going into town?
100% London, 100% London.
Yeah.
And so my gig venues were really the Rainbow and Hammersmith Odeon was my nearest.
Yeah, and the Apollo.
But still will always be to me Hammersmith Odeon. So I was going to Hammersmith Odeon, that was my main one, and then occasionally going.
Sorry,
out.
The Palais, Hammersmith Palais. I was thinking that
was there was Hammersmith Palais was a bit later. Once kind of like it got more punky and new romantic. But like all the kind of like main bands of a size were coming to Hammersmith Odeon. So they were sort of like the gigs that I was going to. So my first
what would have been your first gigs? What was the first sort of
first gig was the Guildford Civic Hall 1973 Hawkwind, and Lemmy signed my tour poster. I didn't even know who Lemmy was at the time. And I waited, and I don't know if you remember Hawkwind, but the early 70s. I mean, I loved it.
Yeah, but only retrospectively, because when I got into that sort of type of music with my 15, 16 in late 70s, it would have been a retrospective.
Sure. Well, they had one particular, live double album, which had a little cosmic sleeve, Space Ritual.
That's right, yeah.
But the thing is with Hawkwind, what made Hawkwind really was that they had a dancer called Stacia who danced topless.
I did not know this.
Right, and not only that, but she was packing. So you're 13 years of age and you're at Guildford Civic Hall. It's your first gig, watching a bunch of Labrador Grove stoners with somebody prancing around with her norks out. It was like, well, this has got to be rock and roll. This has got to be good, isn't it? So that was my first gig. My second gig was my sister's boyfriend. My sister, Jesus, small town Stanmore near Staines in 1973, 73. My sister had a mixed race boyfriend who was just a brilliant bloke. And he had
Your sister older than you?
My sister's 4 years old.
Was there any influences from her that came down?
No, she liked things like, she liked Elvis and she liked Joni Mitchell.
Right.
And
okay.
I mean, I was kind of like, Nazareth, this flight tonight, Elaine, Nazareth. No, actually, it's the Joni Mitchell's track off Blues. Like,
right.
They've had the it. Do you know what I mean? That's who sort of like done it. But the second gig was like, my sister and her boyfriend Mick, the mixed race guy.
Yeah.
They took me to see Roxy Music at the Rainbow, and this was the first gig from the Stranded tour. Stranded had just come out, so this is the album after For Your Pleasure, and we were second from last row of the circle, so we were kind of up in the gods. And the support act was an unknown Leo Sayer, right?
You are kidding.
And the ticket was 80p.
No way. Oh my God. That's fantastic. What a great story. Leo Sayer. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So that, I sort of, went to that. And that really, the reason that I had the opportunity to do this, and, my parents, bless them, weren't, didn't seem to be bothered that I wasn't like I was, not getting out of bed to go to school. I mean, I did kind of go, but at this point, I had I didn't have a paper round. I was a newspaper vendor, so I would get an evening local newspaper. Then I would go onto the cargo terminal at Heathrow Airport and go into each office and sort of like go, "Evening mail," and it'd be like, "Yeah." And so I was selling papers, not delivering papers.
Right.
And I built a bit of a scheme of kind of like, I never used to have to give back my returns. Right. So if I got 100 papers, if I sold them all, it'd be like, how many papers you sell tonight? I'd go, 60. So I'd get kind of like all the money on 40, so I was kind of on a bit of a scam. Yeah. And on top of that, I had a Saturday job. My mum's cousin, who was telling you about earlier, whose son I got on well with, and we loved our music together. they opened. His dad, well, his dad he made some good money to the point that he bought Lord Lucan's house in Leyland. Get that? Oh,
Wow.
shit. But they bought a clothes shop, a men's kind of fashion shop in Staines, and gave me a Saturday job. So effectively, Neil, when I was 13 in 1972, 73, I was earning through my paper round and my Saturday job, I was taking home 15 quid a week.
Wow.
Now, that's a lot of money for 13.
Yeah.
So I just thought, you know what? School's shit. I'm not, I've got no interest in that. I'm kind of, building a kind of a sales ability, and I've got a passion for sort of like music. And so it was just earning money to buy some threads, jumbo sort of like, college sort of shirts, Ben Sherman's, Stay Press, Harrington's, loafer tassels, all that.
Yeah, remember those, yeah.
And I was able to afford those things on my own, and records. I mean, we're talking about now, when I went up to London and bought, Led Zeppelin, Fiscal Graffiti, that was a double album which was under £5.
Good grief, yeah, good grief.
Yeah. And you look at that, how much money it must have sort of like cost to sort of, manufacture that sleeve. I mean, those people just.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, I'm probably going a bit all over the place. So my kind of youth sort of period, I was just sort of like, it was that kind of pop music, but then getting into more, progressive sort of music and rock music.
Right.
No big.
Did you say that was your thing then? The rock, was that what you predominantly?
Yeah, I've always been a guitar driven, more so like,
Did you ever play?
Do you know what? I never, ever, ever had any inkling at all. I've never.
Did you not know? No.
No.
So you're consuming all these music. You're going to see all these gigs. We mentioned just off camera earlier on. We were talking about Lynyrd Skynyrd and Peter Frampton. You ended up going to see them. Tell me about those experiences.
Well, they were just sort of like, but I'd heard sort of Freebird, and I'd heard Sweet Home Alabama, and I was an avid sort of buyer. Actually, this was where my sister did it, because she used to get the NME every week.
Right. So I was about to ask, where did you know about all these gigs? There must have been. Yeah.
NME, and and listening. Pop radio in those days was sort of like, great. So, I was hearing it, and then you would kind of like, go, listen to some Alan Freeman and sort of like, things. And then also with, listen, this, we're talking about this now. It's like, a lot of things that we get to know about was like, being with your mates.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
It was a real community thing. You gravitated towards people who had a passion for it, because, you weren't at that stage yet where you were going to sort of like, pull the girls, and you were developing your music interest. So you were spending a lot of your nights going around mates' houses. Perhaps the most radical thing you did was sort of smoke a fag. Go around your mate's house, kind of, perhaps nick a Colt 45 out of his dad's fridge.
Yeah.
The records. And you would take your records.
You would do, wouldn't you? You'd sit around. I remember going around people's houses, and we would just sit around a record player and we would play records. They wouldn't do that now, and I don't think they'd understand that. But we would really, I would really delve into the sleeve and look at I remember looking at the album sleeves, and Hypnosis were designing all these sleeves, and I just remembered that name, thinking, "Oh my God, another sleeve by Hypnosis," and that's part. It had nothing to do with the music, but it had everything to do with the whole package, didn't it?
Well, and that's a great point, because, Hypnosis has been a great point. So I went and saw a band called Greenslade at the Fairfield Halls in Croydon, purely because, Roger Dean, because he did those Yes Sir, but he also did that kind of same idea for this band called Greenslade, who were this noodly pieces, bunch of shit. But you know what? It's like, wow, I'm going to go and see Greenslade at the Fairfield Halls in Croydon, purely, based on sort of like Steve. So there was an element of trial and error as well. I mean, I couldn't sort of like hear everything, but I was so, so alert to wanting to know more and more and more and more and more. And so, by the time I stopped going to school, which was 15, I'd already sort of like got quite a big record collection. And I'd been sort of like, so see a shitload of gigs. So Skynyrd was something I'd heard on the radio. Frampton was something I'd heard on the radio. And I also went to the 74 Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon tour, Wembley Arena. Wembley, it was Empire Ball Wembley, actually, as it was called then. So I sort of, I saw that as well, which is, an incredible thing, isn't it?
All three are incredible, because, I've seen Pink Floyd, but only once. It was at the Live Aid the second time round.
Yeah.
Obviously never seen Lynyrd Skynyrd, but you saw them just before the
Lynyrd Skynyrd, you know, Lynyrd Skynyrd sort of came over, and they were headlining. They were headlining the Rainbow in London, and they had a southern boogie rock band called Black Oak, Arkansas, with a guy in the lead guy with long sort of like, you know, blonde hair and sort of like silver pants and sort of, you know, topless torso, called Jim Dandy, and they marketed their debut album at 99p. But so when it's all in the Skinner, because I'd sort of like, you know, was into rock, and this was a different sort of like sound of rock. But that was the tour that's, you know, shortly after they finished their UK tour, half of them died in a plane crash back in America.
Yeah.
So, you know, it lost like Steve Gaines, the guitarist, Cassie Gaines, his sister was a backing singer, and, you know, several others. So, you know, that was, you know, so that was a, well, listen, a really sort of like sad, but, you know, I saw, you know, that gig. And of course, you know, when you're hearing "Show Me the Way" all over the radio by Peter Frampton, and then buying the album, you know, then, you know, Frampton comes alive, and then you're finding out he's at, you know, playing Wembley, Empire Ball Wembley. It's a no-brainer. You know?
Yeah.
There's never difficulty to me, you know, because I was used to sort of like, you know, getting on the tube. My parents were pretty relaxed about me going to these kind of things, and so it was nothing for me to be going out to Guildford City Hall, Fairfield Hall, Smithodian, you know, the Rainbow. So I, you know, I wasn't really a kind of like a, you know, a marquee type person. You know, I wanted to go and see the more kind of, you know, bands which had sort of got, you know, I wasn't a discoverer of sort of unknown bands at that point.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, it established bands person.
So when you were at that point, you weren't working?
Well, yeah, I mean, I started working again, you know, through sort of good fortune. I really didn't know what I want to do. And, you know, funnily enough, now I've been having these sort of conversations, you know, now at the right old age of 60, 65. And, you know, and I've been fortunate enough, but I got to be honest with you, I had no ambition. I mean, I say this in all seriousness, if I could have retired at 17, I would have happily retired. I have never been somebody.
Work's overrated, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, I just wanted money, but the only way I was going to get money was sort of like going to work. I got a job through my paper round. I mean, there was a guy at one of the cargo companies, you know, freight forwarding companies, who took a shine to me, offered me a job. And so, you know, when I was just about 16, you know, I started working at Heathrow Airport. I could walk to work.
That's right. I remember you telling me, yeah.
I met a guy from another school who's the same age as me. He became, and still is, like my closest friend, even though he's been in Australia for 40 years. Okay. And then took us on to the next phase when we were starting to kind of, you know, the punk thing came in, and which kind of.
So with regard to punk, what was that like for you with punk? Because I mean, I've done a couple of interviews so far, and I've done somebody who really is into punk, but he was actually younger than me, and for me, punk, it was the kids above me. I mean, and there was nobody older than me for me to get involved with. So punk was, you know, safety pins and bin liners, you know, and it wasn't really until later on that it really I started to see the aftermath of punk, and obviously the if you like the Banshees, the Bauhaus, the kind of goth, the Cure that came out of that, and the new wave that came out of that.
Yeah,
punk was such a short moment, but it had such an impact. Now, you having been from, you know, having really immersed yourself in music from all that way before and done all the rock thing, because punk was the antithesis of prog, right? That was what it was supposed to be. But actually, the two lived side by side quite nicely. Sure. How was that for you when it came in? What was your feelings around it? Were you into it?
No, I wasn't into it at all. I mean, you know, this was a period of time when I was kind of like, I'd left school, I met this my mate Steve. You know, he got a car, which was a complete winner. Yep. It was sort of like, you know, going to you know, the gigs at the time. But we, through some people he knew where he worked at for BP in Sunbury. And there's through.
It's still there, by the way. It's still over.
That's huge, isn't it? Wow, oh my God, enormous. There was a pub in Kingston-on-Thames called the Three Fishes, and on Saturday night they had a DJ there. And this DJ had this kind of like huge sort of like number of cabinets, which just were full of US imports. But a lot of it was kind of like, you know, like West Coast rock.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, an album by the guy who's sort of like been a co-lead vocalist with Steely Dan on the Can't Buy a Thrill. So we were kind of like listening to kind of bands like Pablo Cruz. We were listening to bands like, you know, Fleetwood Mac and Rumours, you know. there was some of the punk that I did like. I did like the Pistols.
Yeah.
I didn't really fall into that love in the Clash. I did like and go and see the Buzzcocks.
Yeah.
But that whole, for everything that punk said it wanted to be was kind of the antithesis of what I wanted to like.
Yeah.
So I did understand it was like, these bands are being formed because you can't wait, 10 years for another Led Zeppelin album.
Yeah.
And that was that whole, and I just thought, this DIY music shit. So, I don't really dig any of that.
Yeah.
So I slightly stuck my toe in the water. But I think, and your good point is that it was such a short-lived thing that led into. So all of a sudden, I remember hearing Psycho Killer by Talking Heads, and then by Talking Heads 77. And so, and obviously there was, there'd been the Ramones. And so you were all of a sudden going into a completely different area of kind. Yeah. And then we were getting New Romantic, and then with the whole Peel thing, then that kind of went into that kind of, 77 to kind of 83, 84. It was just such a golden period.
It was an absolute golden period. So at the time, you're in this, you're working for a freight forwarder in Heathrow.
Yeah.
How then did you make that move from there into the record industry, as it was?
I'm just going to tell you before we just going to go, bore you with, a couple more gigs I saw at Hammersmith Odeon around that part. I saw Devo at the Hammersmith.
Right. Odeon. Wow. Okay.
I saw Television on the Marquee Moon tour, which the support band was Blondie.
Oh my God, you're joking.
And she wasn't even signed to Chrysalis. She just had one album out on private stock, the same label that gave us David's Soul.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So, I was going to, those kind of gigs. But I was, honestly, Neil, freight forwarding was just an unbelievably tedious job. I mean, I really could not get my head around that at all. And I think for the fact that I'm now getting into my, my early 20s,
yeah,
I'm feeling, I'm outgrown Stanwell and Staines and all that. I'm spending a lot of time going to London. I've now got a company sort of like car, and I just got to a point one day and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And I was fortunate enough, I was working with a small company, and, they were looking after me, but I just went in one day and I said, look, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to work until the end of the year, which I think was going to be about 4 months. And then I'm just going to go and get a job in like R Price or something. I just want to be around records. That's what I want to do. And
you'd already made that decision that you wanted to a part of your passion.
Yeah, it was part of I wanted to be part of that. I mean, looking back at it, Neil, was it a great? Well, it was, because, I'm in this situation now, I'm talking to you. And I always say that the decisions we made in our life is where we are at the moment in time. And, for all of the things I can look back and sort of, have a negative attitude towards, I have a great life. Anyway, I digress. One of my import clients for the company I was working for was MCA Records, whereby they, the international department would sort of like, import us, would occasionally sort of like be importing, American sort of, MCA records from MCA into the UK, things like, Tanya Tucker records, and things like master tapes for when they wanted to press and all this nonsense. And there was a woman working, I sort of built up a relationship with this woman who worked in the international department, because like you, Neil, I'm a personable kind of guy. I know how to talk to people, like you could tell. And I sort of speak to this woman, and I got, I sort of go and have a drink with her occasionally, and I said to her, I said, I'm going to give up this job. I'm fed up with it. I just want to sort of like, I just want to be around music. I'm not going to be in a band, but if it means working in a record shop, I know there's a trade, magazine you have called Music Week. If you ever hear anything you might think appeals to me, please do. And she said to me, her name is Julie Hill, and she said, oh, okay. She said, my husband, Malcolm Hill, is the head of promotions at EMI Records. Let me have a casual chat with him. And I said, yeah. Wow. Anyway, a week later, the phone rings in the office, and it's like, John, there's got a phone here for you called Malcolm Hill. And I said, oh my God. So I went, Malcolm Hill, and Malcolm Hill went, all right, John Turner. I was like, yeah. He said, my wife Julie says I could need to talk to you. What are you doing Monday morning? I went, Anyway, Manchester Square, number 20, EMI Records, be here for 10 o'clock. I'll have a word with you. Okay then. And so I kind of, did the obligatory, like we went there, have an early night, make sure that, that I had the Aramis on, nice jacket and nice clothes. I had no idea what people in the music business were for.
Yeah.
Made sure I didn't smoke any fags that morning on the way up to Manchester Square, and went to Manchester Square, sat in reception, told them that, I was there to see Malcolm Hill, and about, I got there at sort of like 10:15, about 10:15. This guy comes down the stairs in very like grey sweatpants, pink socks, Puma trainers, and a grey sweatshirt, and a Watford scarf.
He didn't have one of his shirts on, did he?
No, he didn't. He had the Watford scarf, and that was Malcolm Hill. For the whole morning, I was shown around and said, when you start, this is what you'll be doing. And so it's like, do you have time to go and see Personnel, as it was called in those days? And this is like, end of November, mid-November, 84. And I went up, saw Personnel, and within 2 days, I got, confirmation that I was going to be a Radio 1 plugger.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. And it was like, well, I wanted to start on the 1st December because December's the socialing time, gives you an opportunity to go at the parties, get to know the Radio 1 secretaries. I didn't have a clue now. I didn't have a clue.
No.
And
remember the first records that you plugged? Do you remember those?
Spelt Like This. Spelt Like This was a band which was the first band that Tom Watkins managed before he managed the Passion. And at the time when I was at EMI, they had come off sort of a few hits, but they were in a real dire state. Their A&R policy, the golden days of sort of Dave Ambrose signing Duran were over.
Right.
Getting excited about getting a new Model Army record in the top 40. And of course, nobody at Radio 1 was interested in playing
not the
new Model Army. No. They smelt the hype all over with, Spelt Like This, because it was. And I remember going to meet a mate about 2 months into it. And so it's like, January, February 85, and when it's all over, I said, I can't do this. I was working with a guy who, and it wasn't me, I think I was just the victim of circumstance, because whoever worked with him was going to get the same treatment, who obviously didn't want me there, pretty much cut me loose without even giving me any attention. And I got kind of, navigated through it by a good friend of ours called Steve Payne, who took me, he was working around at Parlophone, and he kind of took me under his wing. But then I had another, Jesus Christ, I've been a lucky sod. I had this other quirk of fate. I got quite chummy with a marketing manager called Jill Wall.
No, Jill, yeah.
Who ended up managing Marillion Knocker Knowles.
Right.
And she really liked me because I was really, really enthusiastic. And then the reason I was enthusiastic was because I remember hearing She Sells Sanctuary by The Cult, which at the time when I heard that record absolutely blew me away. And I was going all the way around EMI, going to people, have you heard this? She said, wow, this is absolutely amazing. And she must have sort of seen something in me, because she called me in one day, and I was kind of working on my own because the guy who I was working with was becoming more and more erratic in his behaviour.
Yeah.
And she said, I want to play you something. And I said, oh, okay. She said, I think this could be a record for you. She said, I could see you're really enthusiastic. By the way, all of this is true.
I don't doubt any of it.
I told you, I'm not.
Don't doubt any of it at all.
She sat me down and she played me this record, and I got to the end of it. She went, what do you think of that? I went, I'm going to get that on the radio. I said, I think that's absolutely amazing. And it was Kaylee by Marillion.
Oh my gosh.
And so, it absolutely floored me, this record.
It did, yeah.
Of course, Marillion were kind of like, and they built themselves a huge a decent-sized fan base with no radio play, because they connected to they built a fan base. They were a proper band. Yeah. Nobody touched them with a barge pole. They'd never had a record played on radio, and they had a lot of criticism of being derivative Genesis, weren't they?
Yes, that's right.
They were Peter Frampton Genesis.
Yeah.
But EMI had kind of stuck with them, put a couple of records out. And they came up with this, with Kaylee. And at that time, Neil, this is pre-you, Radio 1 didn't have playlists. They were just playing ad hoc. Of course, there was some structure. And so this was one of the last records, that I worked before Radio 1 reintroduced the playlist system.
Right.
And so you could get anything from sort of like no plays to 35 plays a week.
Right.
And I was getting, there was none of this like, oh, well, he played it in the last show, we can't play it in this show. I got this record played off the radio.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a number 2 single.
Yeah.
And the record that kept it off number 1
was
one of my misfortunes, my bits of bad luck. the Bradford fire disaster record, because Bradford Stadium had been, had had that fire and people had died. And there was a charity record for that.
That's right,
that kept Kaylee by Marillion off number.
Gosh, wow.
But that started a roll for me, because within a month of that, being a hit, Kate Bush came back with an album, Hounds of Love. So I was the radio plugger for, Hounds of Love starting.
You end up working possibly one of the greatest records of all time.
Thank you. And, had to take, there used to be the show Saturday called Saturday Live with Mark Radcliffe and Andy Batten Foster. And the producer was Mick Vilcoich. And I remember having to take Andy Batten Foster and Mick Vilcoich down to Kate Bush's house in Kent to do an album interview. So I did that, and that was, and then the third record, which, in the trio of, John Turner who were arriving in the music business.
Yeah.
So I was given one of my, favourite bands, and I've already mentioned, was Talking Heads. I saw Talking Heads on the Remaining Light tour, Hammersmith Odeon 1980, support band U2. That's a good one, isn't it?
Wow, that's a brilliant one.
That's a really good one.
That's a brilliant one.
So I was, by the time that was 1980.
Wow.
That and U2.
What was that? Was that Boy?
Boy. They were on Boy, and they were being a properly artist developed, because Boy was their second album, and so they were then starting to kind of, they were on the cuts. So Talking Heads, I was, mad on Talking Heads. I love Talking Heads 1970, 77. Love Remaining Light, Fear of Music, and all those kind of things. But then they got to a point that they left Warner's and signed to EMI.
Right.
And the first project on EMI was Stop Making Sense. I came at the back of Stop Making Sense, but then I came in at the beginning of Little Creatures, and that gave us the Road to Nowhere.
Yes, yeah.
I got it on all over the radio, top 20
yeah,
there.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, I didn't do Once in a Lifetime, that was before me, so they did have a little bit of traction already. So they had those 3 records or 3 projects. And all of a sudden, my phone's ringing, and people want to employ me at other records.
Yeah, which is what it's like. But you're only as good as your next record. So after that, you sort of your EMI period. What happened? Where did you go next?
I didn't. But listen, I did sort of like EMI, but I didn't. I don't know. Listen, Neil, we're kind of mid-20s sort of guys. We're working in the music business. We had no clue really what the music business acted like. We knew record labels, bought records, but I think when you're young and it does
around a lot, didn't we? I did. I moved around a lot.
Yeah, but I think you do have an element, well, especially working in promotions with bands that that you love. You do have an element of arrogance about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I sort of like, felt that, EMI was just getting to be something I didn't want to be at. There wasn't a lot of bands there that I liked. They weren't signing in, getting me excited. And I got contacted by, Julian Spear at A&M Records.
Yeah.
I wasn't his first choice. And the reason apparently I wasn't his first choice was because I was too much of a boozer.
Right. When was this? I would have met you when you were. I don't know, or do I remember you at EMI? I kind of vaguely. When were you at EMI then?
I was at EMI from December '84 until the summer of '87. So about 2.5.
I met you at EMI then. Yeah. So I remember when you then went on to A&M.
I met Nick Godwin at EMI because he was working in sales. He worked the sales team at EMI.
Yeah.
I mean, he used to be in the office. But I got, offered honestly, Neil, my industry career is a train wreck, most of it. So I got, Julian Spear came.
You say that, John, but I mean, I think we all have our moments where we do hit a wreck, we hit a button, and equally along the way there are some ones that didn't happen, but the ones that did, the records that we did work, that did happen, but. You have to remember that everything you've done before gives you that passion and that knowledge that gives you that, if you like, the credibility that when you're talking to people about music, what you're talking about. And if you've been to see Skynyrd, Peter Frampton, and you've been into, those sort of music that you were into in that sort of early 70s, I didn't have any of that. So, and there is an age difference between us, but I didn't have any of that. So I have nothing to fall back on at all. Mine was just kind of like post-punk goth, new romantic, and off you go, but
But that's still really kind of like,
yeah, absolutely. But I think when we were talking to people, I think it was so important for us to have had that knowledge. And when you're talking, you know what you're talking about, and that's why I think people took us on, because we seem to know what we're talking about, and the passion, and it goes into today where I've in a WhatsApp group with you, you send this music and you go, really liking this. I heard it on Radio Paradiso, and it's, I've checked the album out. So you've already done your homework on it. They're a little bit like this. Listen to the album. I think you're going to love it. And 9 times out of 10, I do. There's only 1 or 2 that I think not quite sure, but even then, I'm still prepared to go. Do you know? Maybe I should give it another go and go back to it. And that's the beauty of it is that
I agree.
Had all that wealth of experience and listening, we can still sort of pick things out, can't we?
Well, do you know that's a really, really good point, because I mean I can skip through sort of like I can I mean the weird thing for me, Neil, is that I think I still have a big issue reconciling myself with my music industry career. I think it's a do you know what I think my music industry career was like school reports, which was like John's obviously not bad, but he could try harder and he could do better. And you know what? I mean, I'm just not one of life's ambitious people. And I think the other thing, and the point about you making like, what was it that kind of gave us, everything to be the right person to work in that industry, was that we knew our shit. Yeah. We had a passion for music. Yeah. But then the longer the music industry went on, I thought, I'm surrounded by people who don't have any interest in music at all.
Well, there is that, yeah. I mean, I think what there was a group of a lot of us though. That I mean, I recall going to 3 gigs a week for years. I was just going out all the time, going to gigs. The amount of times I've been to that place down at King's Cross.
Yeah, I know exactly the one you mean. I just can picture it, but I can't remember the name.
Oh, I can't remember it now. But and all those other little places that we went to, as well as the bigger gigs. I mean, the ones I was because I was down in Farnham, we didn't have any really round there. We had a couple of record stores, but it wasn't an awful lot going on in terms of gig wise. So we had to jump in a car and go up. But we all had to go together because only one person would drive. Somebody had to go up there 3 months earlier and go and get the tickets. So we all had to give our £5 to them. Sure. And they come back with a wad of tickets, and then we'd all truck up there, and it would be Hammersmith Palais. Because it was later on and it was around the Killing Joke, Susie and the Banshees, the Bauhaus era, and Hammersmith Odeon, and we didn't really go. Certainly never went to the East End to see gigs around that time, and I maybe have gone to the Rainbow Theatre, but I can't remember who I would have seen there. So, but I mean, it's such a fascinating sort of look for us to go back, but it's easy for us to sort of dismiss what we've done and the role that we've played. Because we just think, at that moment in time, we just think, well, I've got this record and it's not doing very well, therefore it's not very good. Because we lived or died basically on what we had or what was coming if we looked at our, every Monday you get your releases for the next few weeks, and if you didn't have a few things on there, you'd be looking at it going, oh dear, I'm going to struggle here.
100% right. And I think, I mean, I kind of, worked with labels between 84 and 93. So I think I finished in 2017. So, for the length of my 33 career, I only actually worked at record labels for 9 years. And I enjoyed my period at A&M, but it was a bleak period with regards to commercial success.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good period for them. You obviously would remember that as well. My period at Warner Brothers was miserable. Because it was just corporate and the people there, it was just a bad regime. But then I sort of came out of there and then was in a position of what, my phone ain't ringing to be offered to be another job, and I need to go. I don't know how to do anything else. And I was like, I'm trying to think about early 30s, and I need to work. So the only thing I could do was go and become an independent.
Yeah.
And with that, when I went in in 93, I did a bit of work for with Mike Matheson and Julian Abel, who at the time had an independent promotion company.
That's right, I remember. Yeah.
Our mate Nick Godwin at the time was head of promotion at RCA Records, and he needed a bit of filler in work, and he sort of gave me that Swamp Thing record by the Grid, which
I remember that. Yeah.
From Soft Cell. He gave me the Baby I Love You Away by Will. I think that was on RCA. And I had like 2 or 3 hits, which all of a sudden gave me a bit of profile. Mike and Julian were kind of falling apart, and I kind of decided to go on my own.
Yeah.
And a guy I worked with at Warner's, and Kate Burnett, who at the time I was dating. And we sort of like started off, and then our quirk of fate there. We managed to blag some office space in Covent Garden, with a guy who used to be Tom Watkins' business partner.
Yeah.
And he had a business in Covent Garden, and he also still had his half a foot in the music business. And he had a band, and he gave us sort of rent. So we were in Neal Street, but this was just on the cusp of Britpop.
Yes.
The first break I got as an independent, in a big way, was a bloke from Jive Records, Andy Richmond. Do you know Andy Richmond?
Might have met him once.
He, I'd been doing. I don't know what I'd been doing for them, or whether I just heard about it. But he phoned me up, and he was a good marketing guy. Andy. He knew his shit. He knew how to kind of like work that sales marketing stuff. And he phoned me up and he said, "I've got a record, and I am telling you that this is a smash hit." And he said, "You get this anywhere near a Radio 1 playlist. I don't care, what one you get, but you get me that, and you get me a Radio 1 playlist and one network TV, and I'm telling you, we are going to have a smash hit." And I said, "Send me the record. Cotton Eye Joe by the Rednecks."
There you go.
Now,
and I can't tell you around the time I remember.
980,000 sales that record had. Number 1 for 3 weeks. And I got that on the Radio 1 playlist pre-release.
Yeah.
Pre-release. So I got it on the playlist. Kate Burnett picked up some tellies, and Andy Richmond did the rest. And we got that. That was a radio hit. That wasn't like one of those records that radio reacted to after it started becoming a hit.
Yeah.
That was on the radio, and it became 980,000 copies, just short of 1 million in the UK. Massive hit all around Europe. And in those days that, it was being licensed to those sort of like, hit albums, made them an absolute. And then it was in those days as an independent now, we were given a fee and bonuses.
Yes.
So like we'd get, a playlist bonus, but then we'd get for every network TV we got a bonus. So each week, even if we got 10 seconds on the chart show rundown, we made 30 grand on that single.
Wow.
So, that was, and then we went into kind of, the Britpop era, and, I lucked out getting Matthew Austin gave me Terrorvision.
Yeah.
Radio, got them on.
Feeder.
I got Feeder, I got Manson,
Yeah. That was, in fact, what I wanted to do with that sort of era, I want to do a part 2 on that, because I know, because if you look at your history in terms of where you come from, it doesn't surprise me that you then had success with those sort of types of acts. Yeah. And in around that Britpop, I always associate you with those sort of types of bands and with that type of thing going. So I'm gonna cut this to now, and we're gonna do a part 2. We'll rejoin in a couple of weeks' time. We'll do another part 2 and talk about that. Let's keep this one down, because
listen, honestly, it's things happen which kind of like touch you, whereby you just want to kind of share.
Yes.
And this has been I've not had a conversation like this, probably in my life. So for me, it's been absolutely brilliant, man. But this is a brilliant idea of yours, and you are great at doing this. You are a really, really good song. You've got great prompts of questions. And I also have that ability to kind of like, sit back, let the person go, and then pick up on, so,
it's because, but I love the stories, and and when, the idea behind Rockstar or Auction House was actually music memorabilia, and it's creating memories, and the memories that we have, let's pick on the Lynyrd Skynyrd. It'll just never happen.
No, well, I've got to finish on a high then, because there's one humongous era, that for me, my favorite band of all time, and will be for all time, is Led Zeppelin.
Right.
When I kind of first heard my mom sort of like used to go on holidays with the girls, to Germany. They go on sort of trips down the Rhine, and she'd come back with me, and she bought me, this is in 1970. Considering Led Zeppelin never released singles in England, but they released singles in Europe, and she bought me back Whole Lot of Love, Radio Edit, and Immigrant Song on 7-inch single. Right. Wow. So this really kind of infused my love for Led Zeppelin. Although by the time I started buying Led Zeppelin album, I bought Zeppelin 2 first, but they were almost on Zeppelin 4 by 1977. Anyway, so Zeppelin were the world to me, and they still, they will always be my favourite band.
Yeah. And
of course, what they did was like, we ain't releasing sort of like.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And you know what? Peter Grant said the money's in America. We bragged America. The British press was slagging Led Zeppelin off like there's no tomorrow. So they never came to the UK until they came and did some shows at Earl's Court. So it's like 1975. Oh my God, Led Zeppelin couldn't get a ticket. Could not get a ticket. So I just thought, me and my mate Dave Francis went, sod this, let's go up there and see if we can get one off a town.
Right.
So we went up, loaded with sort of like, fivers and pound notes. Couldn't get a ticket. Walked into the kind of where all the turnstiles were, right? Bloke standing there, take your ticket, letting you through the turnstile.
Yeah.
And this guy at the turnstile kind of like ushered us over.
Right.
Said, give us £1 each and I'll let you through the turnstile.
No.
I shit you not. So with this bloke £1, and then we watched the whole of that gig standing in, as you get to the top of the stairs to go and sit in your seats. We saw the whole of that gig. So my Led Zeppelin experience is getting in at Earl's Court for £1.
Oh, brilliant. You know what? I think I might use that as a tagline. Led Zeppelin for £1. That's brilliant. Utterly brilliant.
Led Zeppelin for £1.
Wow.
Jimmy Page with his laser bow, like he had a violin bow with a laser, and you go bam, bam. It's like, whoa, man, I've arrived. I'm sort of like 16 years of age. It's like
£1.
For £1. Yeah, but of course I had the because I didn't have a ticket stub.
Well, but you still got the memory of it, and you still know.
I've still got the memory. So
I'm going to stop recording now, and then we'll carry on. But thank you so much. It's been
Neil,
we're going to do a part 2. Thank you. Stop recording.